try that again. Misha Safran and Safran Consulting, also group founder for Authentic and Wholehearted Joy. And I am delighted today to be interviewing my father, Dan Safran, and my stepmother, Naomi Lowinsky. We will be discussing the topic of joy, how to define it, what it evokes in us, and they've been married over 40 years and what it means to them to create, embrace, and maintain joy. I am delighted to introduce Dan Safran, my dad, my pops, and Naomi Lowinsky, my stepmother, and we are going to be talking about joy. Those of you on the podcast, I will look to see if you have questions as I can. I'm still new to technology. And those of you who are just watching the video as having been a pre-recorded thing, you can certainly put comments in the post below the video. So first I'll introduce my father. I actually read his resume for the first time today, even though I know a lot of things. So Dan Safran actually was the founder and president of Safran Consulting from 1965 to 2015 before he handed it over to my sister, Lisa Safran, who used it for a few years, and now it's been passed on to me. And in Safran Consulting, Dan was in organization development and training. His resume is quite extensive, so I pulled out a few things I thought were especially impressive to me that gave me joy when reading about them. My father's worked with multiple age groups in education. He's worked with as a professor at universities. He's also been a deputy director of Children's Council of San Francisco. He was Northern California coordinator for the EDD program in early childhood education. He also was a lecturer for the Department of Social Work. There's a huge list. A co-director for the Project on Institutional Racism, National Association of Social Workers in San Francisco. And the one that I remember and don't remember is having been the director from 1970 to 72. I was 2 years old, in country education training program for the Peace Corps. We lived in Kenya, Nairobi, as well as this long list of phenomenal experience. My father's also a very active human in the social justice world, having been on the civil grand jury, having also done a lot of, it's not in here, you didn't write about these things, but I'm going to share that my father has worked very hard in retirement to help immigrants and refugees. And it's been delightful to be by his side during that process at rallies and at meetings. And I just really thank you, Father, Dad, Pops, for helping me with my very first podcast interview on the topic of joy. Thank you. And now I will love to introduce my stepmother of almost 41 years. And she also has quite an extensive background. She's got a bachelor's in English. I forgot to mention all your degrees, Pops, but he's got the degrees. And Naomi has a master's in clinical psychology as well as a PhD in clinical psychology. She does have a private practice, usually out of a Berkeley office, but currently on phone in her home, as many of us are during the shelter in place, learning how to adapt and be flexible. She has a lot of professional activities, such as being a certified Jungian analyst, like I said, private practice, poetry and fiction editor, and an adjunct faculty back in 1991-99. And as I mentioned in my description, Naomi is a published author of poetry and books, and I will provide links to some of her publications in the notes below the video. But those of you on the podcast, I will also place comments in there if I can figure out how. So Naomi Ruth Lowinsky has published many poetic visionary essays in psychological perspectives and in the Jung Journal. Her poems have been published in over 100 literary magazines. She has presented her work all over the world, including in Bulgaria, South Africa, and Italy. And I know that we've all kind of had our hearts kind of ripped out a little bit with all that's going on around the world. And you guys have also had many visits to Italy. And I know that there's been some pain in knowing what they're going through. And while I don't want to dismiss the pain and the agony that many people are experiencing, and job loss and illness and death, I am wanting to inspire and instill and create and embrace the power of joy. because I think that we can handle those kinds of things a lot better when we're willing and able to create some moments of joy in our life. So without further ado, unless there's something you guys would like to respond to in any of those introductions or anything that I've said recently.
I just think that we've earned our gray hair.
Well, and you grew your beard just to show that you truly have a lot of it.
This is a coronavirus quarantine in place beard.
It's beautiful, Pops.
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you.
Naomi, anything you want to say or add?
Just that I'm very pleased that he's learned to trim it so I can kiss him without mishap.
This is exactly the reason why you're my first guest on this podcast. You're great. All right, so the first question, what kinds of thoughts or emotions does just hearing the word joy evoke in you? You can take turns.
It's a great word. It's a word that seems to just carry joy in and of itself, as it rings with a bell. It has a bell in it. Words give me joy, and the word joy is just a great word for what we're talking about today.
My association has somewhat changed with time. Joy used to be associated with excitement, adventure, travel, and now I find joy in tranquility.
I would agree. I yes, to both of you. Thank you. Yeah, I am, as a linguist, I love words, and I can totally relate to that, Naomi. And then Dad, I feel like, up until recently, it was like, let's go somewhere, let's do this, let's have something spontaneous. And now it's like the serenity and the calm really feels joyful to me. Thank you. So, I think we'll skip the next question because I think we've just really illustrated the definition of joy, unless there's something else you guys feel you want to add to that. I think.
Nope.
I wanted to say that joy I get two images from childhood of what gave me joy as a child and still gives me joy. And one is in the natural world, being out of the house and running around being a wild horse, which I was for a long time in my childhood. And the other is being in my room and reading a book that is moving me. And those two things are still great givers of joy. Being able to walk around outside in the midst of this quarantine is very joyful, and your dad and I do it a lot. Mm-hmm. And being able to be in my room and read a good book or a good poem gives me great joy.
Yeah. I am also noticing, I just went out today and enjoyed the blue sky and the sunshine and got on a phone call with a friend, and they're like, Misha, did you know your hair is quite purple? But if that was joyful, but I was outdoors and enjoying. And yeah, and I have to say, I used to have a huge love and fondness of reading. And more lately, I've just become so introspective that I haven't spent a lot of time reading, but I know there are a lot of books that give me tremendous joy as well. So yeah, thank you for that. So where does feeling joyful come naturally to you? Or does feeling joyful come naturally to you? Or do you have to work at it? And if you have to work at it, or if it does come naturally, just explain a little bit.
I'm pretty much of an optimist, and I usually find joy most times in most places. These are difficult times right now, and it's kind of hard to feel that way. And one thing I do is I don't watch the news a whole lot anymore. And I take joy in the things that are blooming outside and the sky, and the fact that the environment is cleaning up as a result of all this. So that gives me a lot of joy. But it's really mixed currently with a lot of sadness about the suffering going on. It's just, I feel very bad about that. And I'm not sure if the word joy fits, but I feel incredible admiration for the healthcare workers who are putting so much into this. It's just amazing to me. Heroic is the only word that comes to mind. Yeah.
Well, you're definitely not alone in those sentiments. We have a lot of people who are speaking up and sharing with us their experiences as healthcare workers, but then we also have tremendous generosity being provided to those people, both on an emotional and physical and what's the word I'm thinking of? Instrumental level, Yeah. No.
So as we're talking, I'm realizing, because of what your dad just said, that for me, joy is often mixed with sadness. And I feel a particular poignancy in joy when there's sadness connected to it. And I feel that a lot these days in the situation that we're in, that despite the grief and the terror that people are experiencing, there is so much beauty, and people are acting with so much beauty and feeling. And that also connects to the political realm that your father is so engaged with, and that I get engaged with in poetry, is when I can find words to describe both the grief and the joy of life. That makes me really joyful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to say one other thing, that my life has been much more joyful since I met your dad over 41 years ago. And one of the things that gives both of us, I think, a lot of joy, certainly me, is that we both love words, and we play with words all the time. And we play with their meanings, and we play with their sounds, and we joke about language. And it's just a little banter that goes on all the time. And every time we do it, I just feel joyful.
It's delightful, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I'm a mom in this world with dad jokes.
Right.
My poor kids, they were like, okay, that's a dad joke. I know, I grew up with those.
Right.
Yeah, words are a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's funny because I nickname my days of the week, I use alliteration. So I'll have Marvelous Monday, or in my women's group,
That's right. Yeah.
Authentic and Wholehearted Joy,
Right.
it's called Member Monday, because they get to post what they want to post, or Terrific Tuesday, or Thriving Thursday, or Thankful Thursday. Like, I love alliteration.
Right.
But I also know that my children and I love to play with words, and we create puns, and sometimes intended, sometimes not.
Oh, yeah, get it all from me.
Yes, well, we get it from both of you because it's been a delight. Absolutely. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, Dad, you mentioned already some things where you find joy. And then when you can't find joy, perhaps, how do you create it? And Naomi, you kind of alluded to that with the word games and things like that. What other places do you find joy, or what other kinds of joy do you create for yourselves?
Well, it's a good question. I've always liked humor, and I find some of it in words. Some of it is in situations. I'm not sure if I can even answer it beyond the fact that it seems to emerge, and it pops in and hangs around, and I enjoy it.
And then you share it with others.
I do like to share it. That gives me joy.
Yeah, wonderful.
I often have to do practices in order to find my joy. And I think that has to do with having had a childhood that was in the shadow of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, because my family fled from that, and that I was haunted by a lot of terrible, terrible grief that was not expressed openly in the family. So I have learned from many years of not only doing analysis as an analyst, but being my own analyst, since I'm no longer an analysis, after having had analysis for many years, to work with my dreams and to talk to dream figures who guide me. And when that happens, I feel such joy, even if something very sad is being expressed in the dream. It just it's hard to express the depth of joy, because I think it connects me to something larger, to a greater whole, to a higher power, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, it's very interesting, because I know that I see both of you as very positive and endearing, compassionate people, but the backgrounds of the way you were raised and the challenges that your ancestors and families had to experience really did create a separation, a difference in how you approach joy. Because I know that while you do have a lot of joy and feel a lot of joy, there is a struggle, Naomi, to develop that. Yeah. And for Dad, it's like an absolute, like it's a surge of positivity that just flows. Sometimes maybe not, I don't know. For me, I know that sometimes I forget how to be serious, how to feel the other feelings, because I use sometimes joy or laughter or other things to mask the other painful items. And as I'm developing my own routine, finding a way to have the joy without masking the other behaviors, honoring the other feelings and reactions, and trying to create some balance between those two.
That's among the many reasons why we feel so proud of you.
Right.
Well, thank you. That wasn't supposed to be in the interview, but that's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey,
Well, and also your purple hair, which gives me
I
great.
love my purple hair. It is purple, and I did it myself. Yes, well, this has been a very important topic for me, and the other piece of it is not only creating, embracing joy for ourselves, but do you feel that you're called upon to create or give joy to others? And if so, how does that feel? Like physically, emotionally? That's a lot in one question, but take what you like and answer what you can.
well, I see it as more of an engagement than giving joy. I find that joy emerges between and among people. I don't see it as my role to make someone else joyous. But I enjoy when there's some kind of encounter, either with one other person or in a group, which results in some levity or some sense of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And would you agree, though, like even when you do your work with the immigrants and refugees, that just by being of service to someone, you're actually giving them joy?
I'm not sure. It's a good question, and I'm not sure. I get joy out of the sense that I'm giving back.
Mm-hmm.
My father, your grandfather, was an immigrant. He came here under very difficult circumstances, loved this country, loved what it did for him. And I see in the people I've worked with the struggles that they go through to adapt to a totally alien culture.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they fled something they don't want to go back to, and in most cases can't go back to.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I get joy out of being available to provide whatever assistance I can, whether it's directly or by doing clerical work in an office to help other people do that kind of work.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think, just in the interactions you've had with some of these people, that you've given them a smile, that you've given them a sense of peace and tranquility, like you said, is how you experience joy more today?
I think so. I mean, people don't usually meet me and leave feeling sad.
Right, exactly. So you may not even realize that you're called to create or give joy, that's actually what you are doing. I'm just wondering.
You're right. I don't tend to feel that way, but it does occur.
Because that is not necessarily your intention, but it comes based on your actions and the human and personality that you have and are.
Well, I'll consider that a compliment. Thank you.
Yes, I believe it is. But I think that the piece here that's really important for our viewers and audience to understand is that we sometimes are giving and creating joy for other people when we're not even intending to.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes we retreat and get into an isolated place thinking we have no value or worth. And yet a smile, a hug, can I pick up some groceries for you? There's always these little things, or can I read you something, or can I share a picture with you? Actually can really boost somebody up.
It can. I also feel that even though that may be an intention, it's not a rejection when it doesn't occur. Because some people carry a lot of difficult burdens, and I don't want to waste their time or mine trying to make them feel better when they have things that they struggle with.
Right. And I think what I'm more focusing on is not that you're going in with the intention to try to make them feel better, but that just in being present, you've probably added a little bit of joy to their life.
I'd like to think so. That sounds good.
I like it. We don't have to argue. What about you, Naomi?
Well, because of the nature of my work and having the experience of working on the phone from home now with people, most of whom I've worked with for many years, I'm having the experience that in this crisis, we're all up against our kind of core traumas. And I think it's really important to be aware of that, because if you can either find somebody to talk to about it, who can listen and get it, or even talk to yourself in your journal about it. And this happened to me when I had a dream that I needed to understand, and in working with the dream, I found that I was up against my core trauma as a child, that in this crisis, what was being evoked was the terror I felt as a little girl that came out of the Holocaust. So when I understood that, it was this enormous relief and a kind of joy that I was guided by my dream to be able to understand that. And I think that, in really listening to each other and listening to ourselves, knowing that this,
A bird just flew into the window.
Oh, that's not joyful.
No,
it
it's
wasn't.
not joyful.
It bounced away.
Oh.
Knowing that this incredible crisis, which, we just haven't ever had in our lifetimes, is evoking all of our most primordial fears.
Absolutely.
We can give ourselves space to express those however it works for us, and hopefully be able to connect to something deeper, to some deeper faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, I noticed that in one of my authentic joy parties that I had for the women in my group the other night, we started with the check-in, and it was like, wherever you are, you don't have to be in joy right now. You don't have to be happy and giddy and gleeful. Like, where are you? What's your check-in right now? What does your body say emotionally? What do you say physically and even spiritually? Like, where are you? And then we do a check-in at the end as well. And some people shift and some people don't, and that's okay.
Right.
The idea is to
Right.
accept the emotions and the feelings right there where they are.
Exactly.
But I think there's an important quote, and I wish I could remember who said it, but we don't have to live there all the time. And I think that's a really important piece too. We become aware, and we acknowledge, we accept those feelings, and we move out of it. We can go back to it, but we move out of it and then move back to, like, there's a little dance, that we have to do in order to really have a positive functioning life.
But I think your dad said something really wise earlier when he was saying that he doesn't think of joy as something that he gives to somebody. It's something that might emerge. I think joy is like grace. It comes or it doesn't come. And it's not in our control.
Absolutely.
But we need to be open to it. And if we're stuck in our own primordial angst, we may not be open to it.
Right.
So the more we can acknowledge that those places where we're hurting and scared, the more open we can be to the possibility of joy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Good wisdom, and you're both good listeners for each other. That probably brings you a little bit of joy. Oh yeah, they're listening to me. All right, so I'll ask you another question. Does joy look differently for you as an individual than in a union and in marriage?
Well, I sort of indicated that it did, in the sense that, well, in some ways, I mean, Dan and I, as you know, we play word games, we laugh a lot. And that's very much, a lot of it has to do with Dan's energy. I was always been a very serious person. I was a very serious child and a very oppressed child. And so, he's just brought all that more playful side of me out. And when I'm by myself, I'm sort of, I'm playing too with words or, writing. So it has similarities, but it's my own particular kind of serious way of playing. Mm-hmm. It's more serious when I'm by myself than when your dad.
Oh, you're not like me, drop something and start giggling?
No, I'm not silly with myself very often. Sometimes I am.
Well, I've learned a lot from Naomi about the importance of people remaining as individuals even when they're married. And of course, in some cases, especially when they're married. But so I tend to get joy doing some things that Naomi doesn't do, and the same thing for her. And then we get lots of joy doing things together. And I think it's important that we have access to things that give us pleasure and joy when we're separate as well as when we're together.
I don't want to play poker, and your dad gets a lot of joy from playing poker.
I don't like reading a lot of poetry. So I like hearing poetry, but not reading.
Yes, I know. I've seen you cry when she's read her poetry.
That's right.
Beautiful, very moving. And I think that's a really, really important point that a lot of relationships don't actually understand. Even close friendships, that we do have to have our own autonomy, our own world, our own outlets, and that we don't always have to rely on the other person to fulfill our every need or to like everything we like and do everything we do. I think it's really important. I guess that's called interdependence, right?
Could be, yep.
I think it's also very important for people who are living together in this sheltering in place time, because if you're always in one another's business, you're going to drive each other crazy.
Absolutely.
So you really need to have your own space and have a structure where you can be by yourself and the other person doesn't feel rejected, and then you can come back together and share things and have both kinds of life.
And it's kind of a luxury to have that kind of space, because not everyone does.
Right.
There are a lot of people crowded together who probably get on each other's nerves a lot more because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be very challenging for the next several months as we emerge from this, and we haven't emerged yet.
Well, and I think also, yes, definitely. And I think also when we think about it, I mean, you two know how to be with each other silently.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't. You know, there is actually, like you mentioned in the very beginning, that your joy comes from a sense of calm and tranquility at times. And I think that the more people practice that calm and tranquility, and some people may call it meditation, there can be a more comfortable, content, joyful feeling. And when people are living, a large number of people, or even 3 people in a place together, and they don't give each other that silence, that time for quiet and what's the English word? Repose, rest. Then yeah, you get on top of each other. And like, just for me, I live mostly alone, but even when I'm on the phone or doing Zoom calls, my brain gets totally inundated, overwhelmed, and I have to take some time to just be quiet. Nothing can be on.
Right.
So I remember raising my kids, and there was always noise in the house.
That's right.
But most of the time it was enjoyable noise, but so I think that that's something that's very helpful advice to our listeners or to our viewers, that it's good practice for people to try to learn to be silent with each other. It doesn't have to be awkward silence. It can be loving, compassionate, joyful silence, or just letting people be in their own pain and not trying to fix them by talking at them all the time.
But it's also true that in couples, whether they're same sex or other sex, but whether the partnership is, there may be different paces. So for example, I often need, since I'm more extroverted, more contact than Naomi does. So it's been a challenge for me to learn how to give her the space she needs when I'm looking to connect and talk and joke and whatever we do. And it's been a challenge for her to recognize that I sometimes have more relationship needs in terms of connection and joking than she does. But we work it out as we negotiate.
I know
But one of the things I think has been very good in our marriage is that we've learned to use rituals to have a structure. So we love having dinner together. We love cooking dinner together. And those are rituals that bring us together. And and then we sit and listen to music and, argue whether it's Mozart or Haydn. And, we've been doing that since we met each other.
And you watch movies together. You have movies.
We watch movies together. And
that's another example of negotiation. We'll go upstairs and figure what we're going to watch. And we start flipping through the streaming possibilities. No, yes, no. And finally, okay, let's try that one. And usually, serendipitously, we find something we've never heard of before that's exciting and joyous.
And sometimes not. Sometimes we disagree about it.
Well, and I think that's another element that has brought joy into your marriage and longevity. Yeah.
Right.
The negotiation, I think that's a really, really important word. So
negotiation and rituals.
And rituals. Yes, I love that. Yes. So here's the next question. What is one memory, and I think you shared a little bit of this, Naomi, but we can, however this moves you answer it the way you need to. What is one memory in your history that brings you great joy?
What popped into my mind, and this happened when I first read your question, and it stayed with me, is when early on in your dad and my marriage, when you guys would come over, would be with us for dinners, and we'd all, be sitting around the table. There was this kind of genre called bus stories about what happened to people on the bus, on the 51 bus.
Oh, bus stories.
Bus stories from the bus, and for some reason they were hilarious. And people would sort of cap on one another about who could tell a better story about what weird person they saw on the bus doing what weird thing. Do you remember those?
I don't remember them so much. I did a lot of walking, but I did take the 51 College Avenue bus.
Right.
I remember even at the very littlest age, Adam and I taking that bus from the Etna Street house to the Alcatraz bus stop and walking down to our elementary school. But I feel like when we were at Boyd or Manila that we actually walked to school, but maybe I don't know. I don't remember. But
Well, in any case, the main thing is that there was laughter around the table that helped us coalesce as a family, come together
absolutely.
as a family.
Yes.
And similar things would have people laughing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there were, and then there's a lot of talking at our table.
That's right. A lot.
Dad, what about you?
Well, I have an earlier memory of being 19 years old and getting on a bus in New York and taking that bus to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I was enrolling in summer school at the University of New Mexico studying archaeology.
Oh.
And it was a sense of freedom I hadn't had before. We couldn't afford for me to go away to college, so I was going to a public college nearby, which was a great school. But it was one which didn't afford me the autonomy I was looking for because I was living at home. Mm. And so here I was in a dormitory with a group of people I had never met before from Texas and New Mexico and Oklahoma. And we got along well, had a great time. And it was, for me, an experience of the kind of college life which I had dreamed about but never had. Mm-hmm. So that was very joyous for me. I remember that very in great detail. I remember it.
Yeah, I remember my first time away from home. I think hopefully a lot of people can relate to that, but it is not an opportunity afforded by many. And so it's neat to have that memory. And so what would be one thing in your life today that brings you great joy, and why?
Well,
I know it's hard to pick one, but
it's hard to pick one, so I'll be generic. I get a lot of joy from our kids and our grandkids. And maybe it's the kind of thing that happens when you reach this stage in life, or maybe we're just lucky. But
or both.
Yeah, we Naomi and I each have 3 kids, and among you there are 7 grandchildren, not to mention the few that were grandchildren by virtue of marriages that don't exist anymore. And we don't always get updated on what everybody's doing, but we try to attune to it because it's very satisfying. It's very exciting to see what's going on. And it's also exciting for me to experience what my parents probably experienced with the changes in technology. Yes. I mean, they grew up before there were cars, before there were planes. And we're dealing with a medium now where we're looking at you talking to us on a little box on the table. And here you are laughing.
And next I'll be popping out of it.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Pretty soon. Thank you. Naomi?
Well, I too get a lot of joy from the family, from all of our children and all of our grandchildren, and also a lot of grief too. It really grieves me that Obi is not able to finish his first year in college, and had to come back home and do long distance learning. I mean, it grieves me that Ryan and Ethan, had to be so careful on the trips they took and now have to be so careful. It's a very hard time to be a young person. So it's one of those things where there's that incredible sadness and also the joy of seeing young people grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that, I don't know how many families have internet and how many families have, the technology to afford them to have this regular contact. But the fact that for 4 weeks in a row now, we've been able to have our Zoom family virtual tea, and that's
that's
wonderful.
Really broken down my technological barriers.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just wasn't going to go there unless somebody forced me to. And so the virus has forced me to, and I find myself really moved. I'm also moved and a little frustrated because, I want to hug you and I can't hug you.
Here we can. Ready? Here, just put your arm around. Yeah, what I've done is, have you ever heard of the fear melters?
No.
So
what is it?
Fear melters.
No.
So it's different things that people can do when they're in fear with flight, freeze, faint. And the one so if somebody feels kind of spacey when they're really stressed out and anxious or they're afraid of something, they kind of mellow out and kind of faint or have like a brain fog. So the suggestion, I don't remember the author, but is to do love scoops to yourself. So when you're feeling, so I can do love scoops to you. and you can do love scoops to me, and we're
Right.
sharing. There's some kind of connection and touch and love involved. So
That's lovely.
yeah.
Very nice.
But I also do need to say that one of the great pleasures of life with your dad has been our traveling and the trips that he's arranged. And we've just done so much of that, and I get so much joy from that. I know you do too, Dan.
Mhm.
And right now, we're not able to travel in the ways that we plan to, and we don't know when we'll travel again. And so that's that mixture of joy and sadness.
Right. Yeah, I had a trip I was supposed to go on in May also. And, on the one hand, it's like, wow, yay, I had the money to do this. And, oh, boo-hoo, I'm not going to get.
Yeah, right.
And so now what are the other ways I can travel virtually, or what are the other ways that I can, use that time and space for my enjoyment?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been fabulous as a first interview with guests. And I would love our audience, both viewers and also those who are listening, to enjoy some of your poetry. So are you comfortable and prepared and ready to, emotionally ready to?
Comfortable, prepared, and ready. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me to do this, Misha. It means a lot to me.
Is this one going to make me cry?
You've heard it.
Oh, okay. I'll
Here,
cry
wait,
anyway.
Matt, I'll give you a tissue. Here you go. No, crying is good. It's cleansing.
Crying is good. I agree. That's very important. And I want to say about this poem that it's a very new poem, and it was inspired by, well, what shall I say? The so-called leader of this country referring to the invisible as the enemy. And I thought, oh, invisible, that means a whole bunch of other things besides what he means by that.
Mm-hmm.
And it also was inspired by the trip that Dan and I had planned to go to Venice, which is a city we love dearly, that we're not able to go on.
Mm-hmm.
So those went into the poem. It's called As Decreed by the Invisible. Forget the promise of May in Venice, though your honey's been planning it for many a moon. Forget the palazzo you plan to stay in, you've stayed in before, its third floor view of the Grand Canal. Forget the gondolas, the water taxis, the vaporetti. They're not overflowing with laughing crowds, not gliding through the waterways. They're all tied up at their piers. Their handlers are sheltering in place. So are you. You won't be wending your way through narrow streets, across arch bridges, to an intimate restaurant by a small canal, where you and your love will watch light fade, dusk fall, while drinking a shimmering Veneto Blanco and feasting on risotto del mare. The restaurant is closed. The chef is feverish, coughing, feels like an elephant has stomped on his chest. There is no bed for him in the hospital. The air is heavy laden with the agony I see, I who can't be seen, though I'm running the show, though I wear a golden crown, a halo, a corona. Though I shake the leaves, whip up the air that belongs to us all, passes through lungs, into bloodstreams and trees, into everything that is, including me, I sparkle in Venetian glass, gather droplets of sneeze, scatter the virus. You'll never know whose vital force will ebb away next. Truth be told, you don't believe in me. Don't believe the unseen has power over all. Your brilliant technologies, the joke is your airplanes, your stock markets, your fancy red car that talks to you are all hiding out from me. Now I'm the boss. Stay home. It's time not to get on an airplane. Time not to drive through heavy traffic. Time not to go to very important meetings. It is time to take a slow walk with your sweetie around the neighborhood. It's a glorious day in early spring. Time to smell the magnolia blossoming outside the child care center. Time to delight in the yellow, red, and purple jungle gym. But where are the children? Time to contemplate the sign in the window. How do we end this divisiveness? I am not the divider. I hold you all in my grip. Look, the sky is a clearer blue than you've seen in many a moon. The Grand Canal is running clear, full of fish. Dolphin leap in the estuary. I give you time to sit in your yellow velvet chair, to visit with the dark-skinned bride you helped dress in a dream. She wanted a slinky tight white gown through which her skin would glow. This gorgeous visitor from the unseen has come to help you see joy in terrible times. You wonder, where's the groom? She says, you're breathing. The unseen beloved is in your lungs, is in your heart, is everywhere.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, I know. For those of you who are not watching, but are listening, there's emotion there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very delighted that you were willing to share this time with me to help me build my podcast, to be authentic in your beings. And I'm very
Thank you, Misha.
overjoyed.
Thank you very much. We love you.
We love you.
Mwah. And I definitely love you. And I'm going to stop recording now. So thank you again. This is Dan Safran and Naomi Ruth Lowinsky. And again, any comments or feedback you have, you can put down in the post below. And yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So that was just phenomenal. I imagine you can tell why I adore them so much. And yeah, please feel free to share the podcast, share the video that you just experienced, and spread a little joy, acknowledge the pain, and go forth and prosper and live your lives and thrive. Thank you.